Welcome back to Thrive Thursday. Now, earlier this week on Mental Health Monday, we explored emotional reasoning, that thinking trap where our minds treat feelings as if they were facts. So I feel it, so it must be true. Now, we are also talked about how this distortion can show up in everyday life. So if I feel anxious, something bad's about to happen. I feel guilty, so I must have done something wrong. And as we emphasized on Monday, your emotions are real and they're valid, but they're not always reliable evidence of reality. So today we're going to get really practical, and I'm going to share 5 tools with you to interrupt that emotional reasoning thinking trap and help you reconnect with reality and what's really true. So, tool number one is to name the distortion. This is actually a great tool for all of the distortions because awareness is always the first step. And when we simply say to ourselves, this is emotional reasoning, or with other thinking traps, this is black and white thinking, or this is catastrophizing, it creates some space between the feeling and the thought. So we know that just labeling a cognitive distortion or a thinking trap can actually weaken its grip. So by noticing I'm believing this just because I feel it, you're starting to step into a more reflective mindset instead of a reactive one. So naming it helps to tame it. You've probably heard me say that before. Okay, tool number two is to run the evidence test. So ask yourself, what evidence do I actually have for this thought? And what evidence do I have against this thought? So, for example, I feel like everyone in the room is judging me. So, evidence for that is you might be feeling nervous or self conscious, but evidence against that might be no one has actually said anything critical. People are smiling and most are focused on themselves. So, this doesn't erase the feeling, but it helps us see that feelings don't always equal truth or facts. Okay, tool three is a reality check with another perspective. So sometimes our own minds are too loud to sort through. So in those moments, we need to try asking ourselves, if my best friend felt this way, what would I say to them? Or how would someone else see this situation? So pulling back and getting some perspective can help you to minimize the impact of these thinking traps. So this tool can really help you shift out of an emotion only lens into a more balanced and compassionate perspective. Tool number four is anchor in the present. So, emotional reasoning often comes from old wounds or imagined futures. So, it kind of gets us anxious, thinking about the future, worrying about things that haven't happened. But based on our emotions, we can get into this cycle. But grounding practices can actually pull us back into the here and now. So, just to give yourself a reset, you may want to try taking 3 slow, deep breaths, or naming some things around you in your room to bring you back into this space, or reminding yourself that right now, I'm here, I'm okay, this is a feeling, not a fact. And tool number five is to actually allow the feeling, but don't let it take over. Okay. So this is a subtle but powerful shift. Instead of fighting the emotion, we want to acknowledge it. So I feel anxious. But then the next part is reminding yourself that I don't have to act as though this anxiety is the truth. So I can notice that I feel anxious, but I don't need to obey this thought or this feeling as actual truth. So that is just a thought, it's not a fact, or that is just a feeling. But again, feelings aren't the whole story. So we know that emotions are important signals and they tell us that something's happening inside, but signals aren't commands, they're information. You can let the feeling be there without letting it define your reality. So the more you practice these steps, the easier it becomes to catch emotional reasoning before it really takes over. Now, remember, emotions aren't the whole story, so you want to validate your feelings without confusing them for being factual. That's kind of the sweet spot of mental well being and emotional health. So, next week, we are finishing up our cognitive distortions series with a focus on personalization. Now, that distortion makes us sort of think that everything is about us. So, please consider showing up for next week's final cognitive distortion episode. And I really appreciate you joining me for this Thrive Thursday. And until next time, please take care of your inner world and let your reality, not just your feelings, guide your way forward. If you feel like this is helpful for you or someone you care about, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing it with people that may also find it helpful. I will see you next week. We will look at our final distortion in the series before we move on to some other topics. And I want you to take care of yourself as you look at these things. This can be really hard work, but it's really helpful once you get in the habit of naming your distortion and challenging it and doing some of the tools to overcome it. And I really do appreciate you being here. I will see you next week. Until then, you got this. Take care.